All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're building a complete, high-level biological map of exactly how GLP-1 therapies fundamentally alter human physiology. We're not just talking about simple weight loss here. We are looking at a massive, systemic, biological shift. We're going to map out how these medications literally rewire the central nervous system, how they completely alter gut microbiome ecology, and why they force us to entirely rethink energy regulation and muscle preservation from the ground up. Here is our roadmap for the investigation. We'll be moving through the GLP-1 physiological shift, the threat of sarcopenia, delayed gastric emptying dynamics, the protein-first protocol, and finally, gut motility and fiber.
Section 1. The GLP-1 physiological shift.
So we have to start at the catalyst, incretin mimicry. This is the exact mechanism where synthetic agents basically hijack the body's natural endocrine feedback loops. Now, naturally, your intestinal L cells release the GLP-1 hormone right after you eat, and it lives in your bloodstream for just a matter of minutes. But these new synthetic therapies, they mimic that exact hormone, but with a much longer half-life. They permanently engage the receptors in your brain, your pancreas, and your gastrointestinal tract. This continuously regulates glucose and chemically overrides your behavioral drive to eat, effectively rewiring the entire gut-brain axis.
It's really helpful to think of the human body like a highly synchronized, well-run restaurant. You literally can't change one variable without affecting the whole operation. The medication steps in and acts as this master conductor, coordinating metabolic communication so that every single organ in the system starts operating under a newly established chemical directive.
When we track the exact causal chain across this entire metabolic network, it proves that this is far more complex than just making you feel less hungry. The stomach, think of it as the kitchen, physically slows its motility. The brain, our manager, gets its reward in hunger centers chemically muted. The pancreas optimizes itself to release insulin only when glucose is actually present. In the liver, it just stops dumping excess glucose into the bloodstream. It is a total top-down systems override.
Section 2. The threat of sarcopenia.
Okay, this is absolutely crucial. We're looking at a huge systemic trade-off here. Weight loss without precision nutrition leads to sarcopenia, and sarcopenia is a severe threat to our overall health span. If we only obsess over the number on the scale dropping, we completely miss the cellular reality of what's happening. The human body will readily consume its own muscle tissue for energy if it's not getting enough amino acids. This biological compromise severely impacts our metabolic health, our physical resilience, and ultimately our longevity.
Get this, up to 40%. That staggering number represents the amount of total weight loss during unsupervised GLP-1 pharmacotherapy that can derive entirely from fat-free mass and skeletal muscle. Just think about the long-term evolutionary consequences of that. Losing 40% of your weight from muscle means your resting metabolic rate just plummets. So if you ever stop taking the medication, your body requires significantly fewer calories just to exist. That creates a devastating rebound effect where weight is rapidly regained but almost entirely as metabolically inactive, insulin-resistant fat.
We simply cannot view muscle as just the engine that moves us around. It is a critical, highly active endocrine organ that must be preserved at all costs during this treatment. Muscle tissue acts as a massive metabolic sink for circulating blood glucose. It actively regulates systemic inflammation and immune responses. When you lose muscle on these drugs, you aren't just getting physically weaker. You are fundamentally degrading your body's metabolic machinery.
Now, this naturally leads us to ask a pretty critical question, one that bridges the gap between endocrinology and gastroenterology. What exactly is the mechanical bottleneck created by these drugs? Because while we're trying so hard to protect muscle, we are simultaneously dealing with a gastrointestinal tract that has basically been chemically paralyzed.
Section 3. Delayed gastric emptying dynamics.
Clinical trial numbers show us exactly what happens when the stomach's motility is intentionally paralyzed to extend that feeling of being full. Up to 44% of patients experience nausea. But you have to understand, this isn't some sort of allergic reaction. It is the physiological reality of food literally sitting in the stomach for hours longer than human evolution designed it to. That prolonged transit creates a domino effect throughout the entire digestive network.
By mapping out this causal chain, we quickly see that nausea and constipation are not just random side effects. They are the direct mechanical results of a slowed intestinal ecosystem. It creates this vicious feedback loop. The medication slows transit, which makes the colon absorb way more water from your stool, causing constipation. At the exact same time, the nausea prevents you from voluntarily drinking enough water or eating enough fiber. And that aggressively worsens the exact same gut stasis and completely starves the lower intestinal microbiome.
If left unmanaged, it's a compounding systemic failure.
Section 4, the Protein First Protocol.
So how do we fix it? We need a quantitative structural blueprint to prevent muscle wasting and maintain metabolic homeostasis. We have to heavily skew our diet toward protein, aiming for roughly 100 to 120 grams daily. We also need to actively suppress lipids or fats to prevent worsening that delayed transit time, while pushing fiber high enough to literally force intestinal motility. Make no mistake, this isn't just a diet plan. It is a biochemical rescue protocol. Because the medication chemically turns off your natural hunger cues, we must actively override the concept of intuitive eating. We have to replace it with a disciplined, scheduled, mechanical eating framework. You see, intuitive eating relies on an intact, evolved gut-brain axis, but GLP-1s sever that axis. If you just sit around and wait until you feel naturally hungry on these drugs, you will inevitably starve your muscle tissue. You literally have to eat by the clock, operating your body like a machine rather than relying on biological instinct.
The architectural sequence of eating becomes incredibly critical here. Consuming your protein first ensures muscle preservation before the delayed gastric emptying physically halts your meal. You have a very, very small window of stomach capacity before your vagus nerve starts screaming at your brain that you are dangerously full. If you start with a salad or rice, you fill that tiny mechanical void with zero protein bulk. Those amino acids simply must enter the system first.
Section 5, gut motility and fiber.
Now, implementing a ground flaxseed titration protocol gives us a highly specific, step-by-step clinical intervention to restore gut motility safely. You can't just dump 30 grams of fiber into a paralyzed gut. That's going to cause severe bloating and potentially obstruction. You have to titrate the fiber upwards slowly, exactly like you titrate the GLP-1 medication dose itself. And you have to marry that soluble fiber with excess fluid, about 150 milliliters per spoonful, so it acts as an intestinal lubricant.
Integrating targeted solutions like the Kiwi protocol provides specialized enzymes that work perfectly in synergy with fiber to rehabilitate the digestive microbiome. The actinitin enzyme found in kiwi naturally breaks down protein, while the incredibly dense skin fiber acts as a prebiotic fertilizer for the gut ecology. We are actively manipulating the microbiome so it can adapt to this new, much slower environment.
By layering aggressive hydration, tailored strength training to defend our muscle mass, and optimal sleep architecture, we integrate all these domains into one unified biological shield. Sleep, in particular, is an absolute master regulator here. If you are operating in a severe caloric deficit, prioritizing deep sleep architecture allows your nervous system to fully recover. It regulates your cortisol spikes, and it allows your lymphatic system to clear metabolic waste out of the brain, completely preventing the severe, crushing fatigue that so many patients experience on these drugs.
Dr. Lydia Alexander really hit the nail on the head here. This quote perfectly synthesizes our clinical rounds. The medication opens the door, but structural, systems-level nutrition is what ultimately secures your health span and longevity. The drug is merely the catalyst. It is the scaffolding of protein optimization, gut ecology management, and circadian recovery that actually builds a healthy, fully adapted human organism.
Let's wrap up by zooming way, way out. We should never treat a conclusion as an endpoint. As we continue to map this interconnected system, we have to ask what the future implications are for our evolutionary biology. If we permanently, chemically outsource our satiety and our appetite regulation, how does the human nervous system adapt over decades? Honestly, that is the next frontier of this profound medical shift. Take that thought with you and always keep questioning the systems that run your biology.